Hi, everybody. In this video, I want to look more about if functions and different variations on if functions as well. This is a section that I highly encourage you to read through your text. There's a lot of little small details in these pieces here and how to use different kinds of if functions, and they're extremely helpful. So one thing I want to show you here is to how to use the idea of or and combined with an if function. So in this instance here, I'm looking at my media log. And I want to focus on the topic. So what our client or what our company has noticed is that when the topic is in reference to business attire and nightwear, our profits tend to be higher. So perhaps those topics or those types of items bring in more money, for instance. Whereas if the topic is about sportswear or casual attire, the profit tends to be lower for those types of posts. Etc. So for whatever reason. So I really love to have a new category here called profit group. So is the profit going to be high or low, anticipated based on the topic. And I would like it to say high or low based on if the topic is casual, nightwear, business attire, sportswear, etc. So what I would want it to do is I would like it to say high for profit if my attire is either nightwear or business attire. Otherwise, I'd like it to say low. So this is definitely an if function, right? So if this happens, output this, otherwise do that. So it's definitely an if function idea here. But I don't just have a single thing I'm looking at an or combination. And we could do the same thing with an and combination. So if I wanted two things to be true at the same time, I could use an and function there in conjunction with the if as well. So let me just show you how this could look. And again, these just definitely take some getting used to and playing around with. So I'm going to start with my if function, we'll start with the if function. So we have to have the logical test first. So, if this happens, then we do that or that. My problem is it's like, I don't want it to say, okay, if it's business attire, it says this, otherwise it says this. I want it to be business attire or nightwear. I want both of those things to flag as high profit. So because I have an or idea here, I'm going to nest in an or function. So I'm going to start with typing or, and then it's going to allow me to type in my different conditions here. So that is house in cell F5, excuse me. So I'm going to click F5. And if this is equal to, and I'm going to type in now, business attire. Again, making sure I spell everything correctly, hopefully this time here, as the first option. And then I'm going to do a comma, and I'm going to hit it again and hit equals, and I'm going to put quotes in for nightwear as the second option, end quotes. So what this is saying here for my or category is that if the topic is business attire or nightwear is what we're saying, then we're going to do the following. I'm going to close the parentheses here, and now you can see that we highlighted that the or piece is done. So the two things that I'm looking for and would consider to be like a true is for business attire or nightwear. So if this happens, then I would like it to say high as my answer. And if this doesn't happen, I would like it to say low for low profitability as our prediction there. And then I can hit enter, and we can see that that fills in as well there. So that's how we can use an if function and start to use other more difficult sort of conditions here. So we added an or condition. And you can do the same thing with an and condition. So an and condition would mean that both things have to be true for it to be true. That wouldn't make sense with our category here, right? Because the topic would not be both casual and business attire or something like that. That wouldn't make sense. But if you want to have an and section, you can. So something only flags as high or low if both of these things happen, or if all three of these things happen. And the nice thing is you can make the or the and part as long as you want to. So if it was business attire, nightwear, or casual attire, I could add that third component there with or. So again, definitely play around with your different nested features here for the if function. And I highly recommend you go back through and read as well. So these are some important sections in your text where we don't have time to do every single example. So that's just one that we can do with the if function and combine it with ors and ands, again, which is really nice when we have a more complicated condition that we're trying to express. There are a ton of other if functions as well. One of them is called the COUNTIF function. Another is the SUMIF function. And then you have an AVERAGEIF function as well. So it combines the idea of an if with a count, a sum, or an average. So you're only counting up the total if something occurs, or you're only summing up everything if something occurs, etc. So it kind of puts a restriction on the values that you are counting, summing, or trying to average together. So let's look at a couple of examples here. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard here for a second. And I have kind of a basic chart filled in here, but without all the information here. So we're going to use the COUNTIF function to count the number of records in the media table where the value of the site field is equal to the idea of Facebook. And then we can do Twitter and so on, and Instagram as well. All right, so I'm going to start with cell B11 here. These are merged, but this is still cell B11. And I'm going to start by typing the COUNTIF function. And so if allows just for one kind of restriction, ifs, or if you have more than one restriction that you want to include there. So I'll just start with the COUNTIF function. And then we're going to start with our range. So I'm looking at my media on the media table here. So let me go back to my media log. So I'm working on the COUNTIF function, and I'm looking at this table here. So this is my main table that I'm using in this workbook. This table is called media, just as a side note here, which wasn't really introduced yet. So when I do my COUNTIF function, I'm going to go back to my documentation page here just so we can, my dashboard page here so we can see it. I'm going to start by typing in the word media, and you can see my table will come up there. So it does help if I know the table name. So I'm going to click that. And then again, if I look at my table, I'm just going to go back and forth a little bit here. It's yelling at me. Let's see. You can see that one of my headers is the word site. So that is the one I want to select because that is where I want to know the information for Facebook versus Twitter versus Instagram, right? Those are all labeled appropriately. So on my dashboard here, I'm going to go try this again. I use my COUNTIF function. I'm taking information out of the media table. I'm going to use that bracket there, and then I can select site. So I'm looking specifically at the site column, right, to kind of narrow down which site I'm focusing on. So this is where my information is coming from. And the condition that I'm going to give is I do want it to be Facebook. Now, you can do this in a few different ways, but one way is that I already have the word Facebook here in cell B10. So I can select that, and it will now match anything with Facebook will get counted. And I hit enter and I get 332. And I can do the same thing for Instagram and so on. So I can do my COUNTIF function. Again, I'm going to highlight that media table. I'm going to use the site information. And then for this one, I want to focus on anything that says Instagram. So I only want things that say Instagram to be counted. So I'm going to highlight the word Instagram here in cell D10 as one way to do it. And it will count that up as well. And I can go ahead and continue on to Twitter and so on here. So we can count them all and so on. So that's how we can use that COUNTIF function. And there's other restrictions as well. So we were doing it by using a cell reference here. You could also type in a name. So for instance, I could type in Instagram instead. So again, we're highlighting that word Instagram here. Or if it was something different, like let's say you had a restriction on the values, you could type in something to do with numbers. So maybe you only want to count data that is greater than 100. So you could use the, greater than 100 tab, for instance. That's not going to make sense here because our tab is all words, but we could apply any sort of conditional technique that we need to. So here, I only want to count the cells that have the word Instagram. instead. So I'm going to apply that condition here. But again, you could use it for any condition you want and use it with values or words and so on. So it counts the cells like we're used to, but it has an additional if feature to it. So it only counts the cells if a certain thing happens. And we can do the same thing with other functions as well. So going down here to posts, we have a SUMIF function as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use that table, that media table, and I'm going to highlight the site feature. Oops, let's use a bracket there. So I'm focusing on, again, the media table, focusing particularly on that site column. And I'm only going to reference those that are Facebook. So here I'm going to highlight B10 again, because I'm going to note Facebook is my core reference there. Now I do want to sum the values here. It doesn't make sense to sum the media site column though, right? That doesn't have any numbers in it. That just has my reference for Facebook. So which columns am I actually going to sum? I want to sum the views. So I highlight my media table. I'm going to do a bracket and type in or double click views there. And I can do it that way and then hit enter. So again, if I go back to my media log, I'm basically telling Excel like, hey, we're going to look at just the information that says Facebook here. And I would like you to add up all the views, for instance. So that is how we can do sum and use that sum function along with an if. So again, we are summing information, but in this case, only ones that say Facebook. So you're focusing on a particular topic in this case, and then also on the column of views. So that works there. And again, you can change this for Instagram, Twitter, and so on as well. And we can do the average too. So there's also a feature we could do average. So let's see. All right, we're going to go to cell B19 here, and we're going to type the average if function. And again, I'm going to still use that same table. So I'm going to start typing in media for my table, and I'm going to use site there as, again, that kind of core reference. And I'm still typing in B10 because, again, that's where my Facebook reference was. So the first part of this, this feature here is to really show, okay, where are we looking? So we're telling Excel, hey, look in this table in this column for the word Facebook. Okay, now we're going to find the average of these particular values. And they want us to average the followers there. So highlighting my media table. Again, I want to use the followers column in this case. And I'm going to end my parentheses and hit enter. So these would be the average followers in that case. So again, we're really just playing around with the idea of if combined with other functions. And the big ones tend to be count, sum, and average. Now, even still, there's more you can do. We also have min if functions and max if functions as well. And then you can also add an S on the end of if and make it ifs. So it allows you to put in more than one condition. So for instance, here, instead of just focusing on, maybe we're looking at values that are greater than 100, maybe look at values that are greater than 100, but less than 200. So you have two conditions in there for that if process. So you can apply all of these, count if, sum if, average if, etc., using ifs and have multiple conditions. So I suggest, again, I highly suggest, sorry, here's Griffey, that you read through the text. There's quite a lot that you can do, and really just play around. Again, always play around in Excel where you know the answer first to know that you're using the formula the right way. But there's really a ton of good information in this section here, and those if functions really come in handy to, again, count, sum, average, and so on, but only when you want to average, count, some certain parts of the information where we don't want to sum everything, but only ones that meet a certain condition.